Hi, everyone. My name is Arya Sharma. I'm professor of medicine at the University of Alberta. I'm the chair for obesity research and management and have been doing active obesity research both at the bench and in clinical research over the past 20 years or so. I also sit on the council of the Obesity Society. Now, a couple of months ago, I posted something on my blog where I wrote about why I go to scientific meetings. And I really wrote this post when I was at a scientific meeting, and I was thinking about why am I actually here? And in case you're wondering what the question was, I know that many of you will probably be thinking, or have probably already made plans to attend Obesity Week, which is taking place in a couple of weeks in New Orleans. Now, I know that there are lots of good reasons to attend a conference, and we'll talk about those reasons. But you don't really have to, because we know that most of the talks that are going to be presented there will be made available online after the conference. And in fact, it's a lot cheaper to stay home, and you don't pay for the accommodation, you don't pay registration, you don't have the hassle of traveling, and of course, you can listen to these recordings anytime, anywhere. So, going to scientific meetings, the reasons have really changed over the many years. Now, there are some obvious reasons for going to scientific meetings. I mean, one of them, of course, is seeing the world. I remember when I started out going to scientific meetings, I believe the first meeting I got to, and I was still uh, sort of doing my postdoc at the time, was actually in Japan. And for me, that was my first opportunity to actually travel to Japan and take a look. And since then, I've been to a lot of different meetings, and I still very much enjoy the aspect of traveling to scientific meetings and visiting all these countries and places. And uh, you don't often have a lot of time, but it's still a very enjoyable part of going to meetings. But of course, to be honest, one of the key reasons to go to meetings, is to listen to the experts. Uh, you often have the opportunity here of attending, especially in the plenary sessions. You'll get to listen to people who are experts in the field and who talk about the things that they're passionate about and the things that they're working about. And it's really often quite an experience listening to a lot of these folks that you've just had an opportunity of perhaps reading their papers or hearing about. And when you see them live on stage, presenting, talking about their research, it really does give you a good impression of who they are and what they're like and what they're passionate about. That's certainly one reason, and obviously a very sensible reason. And this is something that I think is absolutely important for all of us working in the field. Is it's a great opportunity to present your own research, and you're presenting your own research often to colleagues, very often to colleagues working in the same area or having the same kind of interest. And by getting up in front of an audience and presenting the work that you've done, the work sometimes that's taken you many years to accomplish is very rewarding. And when you have the right kind of audience and you get the audience questions, it can be very stimulating. I know that when you first start out doing this, it can be very uh, nerve-wracking. But if you prepare properly, if you have a good coach who can coach you through the presentation, and if you're confident about the work that you've done, then presenting your work to an audience of peers is certainly one of the most rewarding experiences that you'll have, and that is certainly one of the a really good reason to go to these scientific conferences. Now, a lot of people are often disappointed when they don't get to give an oral presentation, but in my experiences, posters are also a very powerful way of presenting your work. In fact, at most poster sessions, you tend to have one-on-one conversations with people who are leaders in your field as they stop by, and it's great, and you have a lot more time to talk about the actual research that you've done. And when people have one-on-one questions about the methodology or the interpretation of your results, it's really an opportunity to show how much you care about the work that you've done, and and sometimes you really get stimulated by the questions that people ask. Now, it's not always easy to get people to uh, stop by your poster, and sometimes you have to come up with innovative ideas. And here's just a picture of one of my Canadian colleagues, who I remember when he was at a world conference in Stockholm. He was presenting some work on dairy research, and he got and he presented his work wearing a cow costume, which was quite original. And you can imagine that a lot of people came by and stopped at his poster and wanted to talk to him. And this was before the era of selfies. So I'm sure if you show up in a cow costume today, everybody would want their selfies taken. But it's one way of attracting attention to your posters. But really, posters are a great opportunity for one-on-one conversations. But I want to talk about the most important reason to go to scientific meetings, and this is really the number one reason to go. And that is, this is your opportunity to build your professional network. This is not something you can do online. This is not something you can do sitting at home at your desk. This is not something that you can do, working in your lab or reading papers. If you want to build your professional network, and that is certainly the key. If you talk to any senior researcher, if you talk to anybody who's been successful, most will probably tell you, or most will probably agree that perhaps having or creating your professional network is as important, if not even more important, than the actual work that you do. The work that you do, you could be doing a lot of very good work, and you could have your publications, and you can publish in top journals. But if you don't really know anybody, and if nobody knows you, then your chances of really progressing in your career are certainly reduced. So when you think about building your professional network, and remember today when we talk about professional networks, we're talking about global networks. We're talking about your colleagues who are in Europe, your colleagues in South America, your colleagues in Asia, your colleagues in Australia, your colleagues in Canada, obviously. I mean, all the people around the world working in the field, and there's lots of people working in the field. And it really becomes a question, and it often becomes challenging. How do you find all these people? How do you get to know all these people? And how do you start building relationships with these people? And that's really what I want to focus on in this recording here, because it is so important for your career, for your understanding of the science, and for progressing in your career, and making decisions about your career ultimately, to really have that professional network, which is probably the most useful thing that you'll have in your career. So let's think about it. You could start by making a list of who are the people that you know. So if you think of all of the leaders in your field, all of the people whose papers that you read regularly, people who are publishing in your area, people who've invented some of the methodology that you use in your laboratory, some of the people who write commentaries, the editors of journals that you submit articles to. If you make a list of all of those prominent names, I'm sure that you could just sit down and, there'll probably be 10 or 15 names that come to mind of people that you really look at as leaders in your field, look as leaders in your discipline. So make that list and think about, who are these people, and how many of these people do you actually know? And when I say know, how many of these people do you actually know, in the sense of, well, obviously you know their work because you read their papers. You might also know where they work, because you might know that somebody is in New York or Cincinnati or Stockholm or wherever. But what else do you know about them? And just think about that. Uh, Perhaps even more important is who knows you. So who of these, 10 or 15 people that you know, or you think you know, how many of these people would actually know you? So if someone went up to these people, any one of these folks, and said, well, do you know, John Doe from Cincinnati? Well, do they? And you'll see that list probably will shrink very quickly. So out of the 10, 15 people that you know of, very few of those people might have even ever heard of you. So now I want you to get more strategic. And the strategic question you really have to ask is, well, who do you really need to know? And that probably includes all of the people that we've already talked about. So the people who publish in your field, the top experts, the people who run the big laboratories, the folks who, the editors of journals, the people who review papers, people who sit on review committees. These are all people in your area of expertise, in your field. If that's where you're trying to make a career, these are really the people that you're going to have to get to know. And so these are the same people that you would not just want to get to know, but you want them to get to know you and get to know about you. And really, there are ways of corresponding with people. You can send them emails, you can send them copies of your papers, you can you could visit them in their home laboratories, and that's another strategy that's very effective if you want to travel. You could get invited to give talks at their institutions. Those are all very effective strategies. But one of the easiest strategy and one of perhaps the most effective strategy is actually tying up or getting to know or meeting these people at these scientific meetings, because that's where hopefully a lot of the folks that you're trying to get to know and the people that you want to get to know you are likely to be. And so really, if you're trying to build that kind of a network, that's where you want to be. You want to be at those scientific meetings, which means that one of the main reasons for physically traveling to be at a scientific meeting is to get to know people. Okay, so where are your opportunities? Obviously, there are lots of opportunities of meeting the leaders in your field. One of them is, for example, presenting your poster. And if you're presenting your poster, somebody stops by, and if you recognize, you look at the name tag, and here's a name that you recognize, and say, "Wow, you know, here's a big shot in my field." Well, this is your opportunity to talk about your research, talk about your passion, and do it in a way that really shows that you understand the field. And hopefully that conversation makes it memorable to the person that you're talking about, so that they can actually remember, oh yeah, I talked to this person, at this meeting. And that's certainly, that's a great opportunity, and that's something that you should be prepared for. But there's also a lot of opportunity for one-on-one conversation. So just if you recognize somebody who's big in your field, walking up to that person and introducing yourself and saying, I'm so and so from such and such lab, and here's what I do, and I really admire your work, or I've read your recent paper on such and such, and I do have a question. And hopefully it's a smart question, but it doesn't have to be a really smart question. It just has to be something to get a conversation started. And this is really your opportunity to talk to someone and tell them a little bit about yourself. Not too much, because you don't want to be stopped by people, who just stop and then go on for hours about the kind of research they're doing or their interest, or asking, complicated questions. This has to be conversational, because the more important the person is that you're trying to talk to, the more other people want to talk to that person. And certainly these folks are very busy when they go to these meetings. So you want to be respectful of their time, but you certainly do want to take the opportunity of walking up to them, introducing yourself, and just saying hello. I admire your papers. I read your papers. I really love the work that you were doing. Or here's something that I'm working on that I think you might, find of interest. Because you often don't have a lot of time to talk to these folks, one of the things you want to do, and this is really, really a good strategy to get people to remember that they even talked to you, apart from just simply handing them a business card, which, by the way, I hope you have, because please do not go to scientific meetings and not carry business cards. But you can go one step beyond that. I mean, you could get people to you could promise to send people something. So you talk to somebody, say, here's a project I'm working on. I've had a recent paper on this that I think you might find of interest. If they haven't read it, then you could offer to send them a copy after the conference. It's always important to follow up on these things, and it can be very effective. And it's just another opportunity to remind people that they've actually met you. There's one very effective strategy that's become quite popular, and I find that a lot of people seem to be using it, is that when you meet one of your idols, or somebody who's famous in your field, ask them if they'd agree to have your picture taken with them. So doing a selfie with them, and a lot of people feel quite flattered when you do that, and it's and it's become very, very conventional. It's become very common. So walking up to somebody and saying, "Wow, you're Professor so and so. I really admire your work. Would you mind if you took a picture?" Then you take a picture. Now, one of the things that you can follow up with here very effectively is then, just send them a copy of the picture. You can always find their email address. Usually, that's not a big deal. If you Google their name or look at PubMed, you can find their email address. Wait for a couple of days till after the conference, and then just send them a quick note. Professor so and so, it was a real pleasure meeting you at the meeting. Here, by the way, is a selfie. If you ever have the opportunity to visit my town, or I'd love to meet with you again, or whatever. Don't make it too long, don't make it too complicated, but really it's just a way of connecting. And we'll talk more about how you make connections and how you can keep those connections later on. But this is really a hugely important part of attending scientific meetings, is these one-on-one meetings, one-on-one opportunities that you'll have with leaders in your field. So sitting around with colleagues, sometimes just finding a seat at a table where there's someone who's a leader in your field who's sitting. It gives you an opportunity to talk to those folks, and again, it's a one-on-one conversation, and people, will ask you, well, who are you? What do you do? And be prepared to answer those questions. Prepare your elevator speech about who are you, what do you do, what's your work, uh, and who do you work with? Because very often you'll find that they might not know you, but they might know your boss, or they might know someone else who works at your institution, and there's a way, and there's usually a way of connecting, and that's really important to take those opportunities. Now you might again meet people who are not really in your field, but who are certainly important people in your community. So, and then things might happen for you that you might never have expected. So what you see on this picture, for example, is a picture of someone that many of you might know. He's Yoni Friedhoff. He's probably one of the most prominent bloggers in the obesity scene. Uh, and writes a lot about public health issues around regulating the food industry, etc. So that's that's the person here on the right. On the left is Travis, and Travis was a young student at the time, and I know that the two met at one of the conferences here, and Travis became a big admirer, and actually I think this might have been the conversation that actually prompted to Travis to start his own blog, which he then started, which is called Obesity Panacea, and has also become very, very popular. So sometimes these meetings that happen on the fringe of the conference, just chance meetings with someone that you've heard of or someone who's prominent in the field, can lead you off in directions that you might never have expected. Uh, I personally often use these conferences, and in fact I always use these conferences not just to catch up with old friends, but then also to have fun with old friends. So what we do, this is a picture of myself with again Yoni Friedhoff, and we were at the obesity meeting before it was Obesity Week in Phoenix a couple of years ago, and so we made it a point, both of us being sort of obesity people and you know promoting healthy diets and all that. Both of us made it a point of actually going out and visiting the Heart Attack Grill in Phoenix. Some of you might know of the Heart Attack Grill, and I think I can tell you that we did not opt to have the triple bypass burger. We ended up having a double bypass burger, which was pretty good. The fellow in the middle, by the way, Dr. John, is not a doctor. He's the chef. He's the guy who owns the place. So this was a lot of fun. It was a long cab ride out to the Heart Attack Grill and back again. Well, that was great because I missed a lot of talks. I missed a lot of presentations. I could have been at all kinds of sessions. But I got 2 hours in the cab with Yoni, and we chatted about a lot of things. And not just since then, but he's a great friend and he's a great colleague. So you take those opportunities of if you're planning to go sightseeing, don't do it by yourself. Find someone, whether it's an old friend or someone that you've just met. Go out in a group, and make it a social experience, because really that's where you get to know people, and that's where you start building those relationships that are going to last you. And I can tell you that a lot of those relationships can be really, really powerful and effective. Now, what you see here is a group photo of folks from, these are all researchers from Ottawa. And so one of the things that scientific meetings, even large international meetings, often give you the opportunity is of connecting with your own colleagues. And these can be your own colleagues from your own institution, people that you don't see daily. So I'm not talking about the guys that you work with in the lab. I'm talking about the person maybe who works in the lab down the hall, or maybe works at a lab in a different building, but you're all from the same institution. You don't get to see a lot of these folks when you're back home. But now that you're in a foreign place and maybe a foreign country, there's a great opportunity here of connecting with those folks, and that's really important. So you get to know people, and you catch up, you talk about stuff, and you talk about politics back at your institution, and you find out who everybody is and how they're doing, and you really get to know folks in a way that you might not be able to get to know back at home. It's definitely about having fun. For me, meetings have always been about having fun, because they are, in fact, a very, very enjoyable part of the whole academic enterprise. I mean, I love doing the research. I love publishing the papers. I love getting published. I love being invited to speak, and I like the travel. I like all of that. But there's nothing like having fun with colleagues, because there's something special about having fun with colleagues. When you're out with colleagues, your peers, these are folks who who work in your area. They share your areas of interest. If you go to an obesity meeting, you'd expect everybody there is really passionate about obesity, whether it's prevention or whether it's, it's a basic science aspect or it's clinical management. And it's really important to get to know those folks. What you see here on this slide is a bunch of uh, young trainees from the Canadian Obesity Network, and they were if you've ever been to a Canadian Obesity Network meeting, which I highly recommend, you'll see that there's a lot of engagement from the younger people, the trainees, and it's specifically something that happens at the Canadian Obesity Network meetings and is quite special. So here you see a bunch of students or trainees. They're not all from the same institution, but they've gotten to know each other, and as you can see on the picture, they're certainly having fun. And that's a really important aspect of this. Because what you want to do at these meetings, you want to take every opportunity you have, not just to meet people, but to really bond with people. Now, there's no better way to bond with people than to have fun with people. And that brings me to the next topic, and that's the social events. So when you go to meetings, there's always social events. And I know there's a lot of people who don't like going to the social events or don't bother going to the social events or would rather do their own thing or would, go back to their room and work on something. Try not to do that. You're missing out on a big part of what happens at these at these meetings, and that is bonding with people, and you bond in fun ways. And it's also very often the part of conferences that remains the most memorable, and that really helps you a lot. What you see on this picture here, for example, is an event that was again at a Canadian Obesity Network meeting, and you can see everybody's wearing cowboy hats, and you can look at the smiling faces, and you can see these guys are ready for fun. There's drinking games. Take part in the drinking games. Do it. If you don't drink, well, do your shots with, with sparkling water or whatever. You want to be part of the community. Here you can see everybody practicing their line dance moves, which it's a Western Canadian thing, but it's a lot of fun. Remember, even these social events are really, really important, because at the social events you still get to have those conversations with people. You still get to know people. You still get to make new friends, and it's a very different setting of how you get to know people at social events versus just sitting in a conference room listening to someone or walking up to someone in a formal setting. And you will very often at these social events meet the same people that you talk to during the day. These are the people who stopped by your poster. Hopefully, these are the people that you had an opportunity to listen to. And if you didn't have a chance to talk to any of these folks, during the day, during the meeting, well, here's your chance. And you can, again, you don't want to have, complicated scientific meetings here, but again, it's your chance to walk up to someone, say, "Wow, I really enjoyed your presentation. I loved your poster. I stopped by your work." And get to know them, buy them a drink or have fun. It's such an important part, because this is really where you're starting to build friendships, and these are the friendships that can last you throughout your career. Ride the bull, be stupid, be silly, have fun. It's really such an important part of going to scientific meetings, because you are bonding with your peers when you do this. So here's my list of things that I recommend you try not to do. I know people have different personalities, and some of the stuff might really not come easy to you, but here's my recommendation. Here are the kind of things you'd rather not. The first thing, and I see a lot of people doing this, they take work to meetings. So you're going to Obesity Week, you're going to be there for a week, and then you take a whole bunch of work. So you take grants that you need to write and submit. You're working on a deadline. You've got papers that you need to revise. Maybe you're taking a bunch of things that you need to review, etc. So people take a lot of work to meetings very often. Which is fine if you're planning to do it on the flight, to the place that you're going. But what a lot of people do is they plan to do all this work while they're at the meeting, and what they end up then doing is going back to their hotel room, or in fact even being at the meeting, but spending most of their time in their hotel room working on all the work that they brought, which really kind of defeats the purpose of going to the meeting in the first place. Some people don't actually take work to the meeting, but then they haven't quite finished their talk. So for the first three meetings, for the first 3 days of the conference, because their talk happens to be on the fourth day, well, they lock themselves into the hotel room because they're now practicing and preparing their talk. And so they're really missing out on a big part of the meeting. They miss out on social events because they say, I've got all this work that I need to finish. And the other thing that happens is if you take all this work and then you don't do the work because you realize that it's way more fun hanging out, at the social events, and you find the program really interesting, and so you want to listen to all those talks. Well, then you come back from the meeting, you haven't really done the work that you thought you would get done, and you've taken it along, and that kind of leaves a little bit of a bad taste, and also has you scrambling after the meeting. So, I fully understand that sometimes there are just deadlines that you have to meet, but don't plan on this. So when you know that you're going to a meeting that's going to be a 4-day meeting in an exotic place, don't take a lot of work with you, thinking that, okay, so while I'm there, I'm going to get all this work done. Really, when you go to a meeting, be prepared to spend virtually all of your waking hours at the meeting or with folks from the meeting, because that's really what the meeting is about. And that's how you get the most out of actually physically going to a meeting. Here's another one, and again, I understand that this is not always possible. Sometimes you don't have a babysitter. You've got to take your kids. You've got to take your partner. Sometimes you just think it's a great idea. I'm going down to this town for a couple of weeks. Why not just ask my friend to come along? Which is all great, which is fun. But remember, if you really want to get everything you possibly can out of the meeting, the last thing you want is someone who's not at the meeting, or someone who has got absolutely no relationship to the meeting, or no interest in the meeting at all, waiting for you back at the hotel room, or waiting for you back at the hotel. Because that is really going to rob you of the opportunity of fully engaging in the meeting. When you're sitting, whether it is, but because I can tell you, here's what happens at meetings. You have to be prepared for random acquaintances. So just imagine, it's 4 o'clock. It's the last session of a meeting, and you've gone to this spectacular plenary talk by one of the absolutely key people in your field. And after the talk, you go up to you go up to this person, you introduce yourself, and you say, this was all fantastic, this was great, I'm really interested, and you tell them a little bit about yourself. And now the unthinkable happens. This person, turns to you and says, "Wow, that's really interesting." And your supervisor, he used to train in my lab, and I'd really like to hear more about how you're doing, etc. In fact, I'm actually just about to go for drinks. Why don't you just join us? Wow, what an opportunity! And now, because you have somebody waiting back in your hotel room, and it's almost 5 o'clock, and you promised you'd be back at 5, and in fact you've made dinner plans with whoever it is back in your hotel room, you're going to have to say no. Oh, thank you so much for that opportunity. Thank you for the invitation, but really I have to get back to my room because I've got my partner waiting, or my kids waiting, or whatever waiting, or or I've already teamed up. I've already promised to see a friend who happens to live in the town. So you've just killed that opportunity. Which is, don't make plans, don't commit yourself to a lot of things that have nothing to do with the meeting when you're at a meeting. And one of the biggest commitments is when you take family and friends. Here's another scenario that I think is really important. So here you've decided that you're going to join a couple of colleagues, people that from a different city. You meet them once or twice a year. There's lots of science to discuss, lots of things that you want to know about the work that they're doing. It's your opportunity to share the work that you're doing. And so you all decide to go out for dinner, which is great. But now you have your partner tagging along, and your partner doesn't work in obesity, works in some unrelated field. And you go out for dinner. Now, everybody at that table is going to feel really uncomfortable just talking about obesity all evening, because here we've got somebody now at the table, who may want to be part of the conversation, but can't be part of the conversation because they're not in that field. So now everybody's polite, and now we'll talk about other stuff, which is great, but again, kind of almost defeats the purpose of that whole meeting, because here you're trying to catch up on the work that you're doing, and you're trying to build a professional relationship, but you're kind of mixing the professional relationship with your personal relationship, which sometimes can work out, but again is perhaps not exactly the ideal situation. And it's not just awkward for everybody else. It can be awkward for the person that you've now invited to be part of this, because they're really not part of this. The only thing that makes them part of this is the fact that they want to hang out with you, or you brought them to the meeting. So unless you're really in that situation where you have to, or where you think this is totally appropriate, my recommendation is always, try not to take family and friends to meetings. Try not to make appointments with old friends who happen to live in the city. Try to really focus on the meeting. Be as flexible as you can in your schedule. Don't have people back in the hotel waiting for you, because you never know what happens at these meetings, and you want to take advantage of all of those chance encounters. Uh, Here's another one. I totally get it that there's often a tendency when you travel with colleagues from your own lab to a meeting that you make plans to hang out together. Uh, which is fine. But again, if you're going to a national meeting or you're going to an international meeting, again, this kind of defeats the purpose, because the reason for going to a national and international meeting is really meeting the folks who are from across the country, and hanging out with people maybe from other countries and trying to build those relationships. And if you're just going to hang out with people you already know, and perhaps even the people that you work with every day, well, you can hang out with those people if you really wanted to, back home. Uh, it totally defeats the purpose of traveling across the country or traveling to another country for a scientific meeting, and then you're spending all of your time with the folks that you already know, with the guy that works on the same bench, or even just the people from your lab. So if you if you want to hang out with those folks, make it short. Um, Maybe one evening out of the whole week that you're going to be there. If if your supervisor wants to take you out for, you're not going to say no. Uh, but but try not to make that the main or the central, uh, the central thing of going to that meeting. But what you really want to do is you want to have those opportunities to meet folks from other cities, from other labs, from other countries. And so just hanging out with all of your friends and your colleagues and people that you could be hanging out with when you're back home really defeats the purpose of going to a major scientific meeting. Okay, so let's move to some of the things that I think you certainly should do. And these are certainly things that I try to do when I go to meetings. The first one is, uh, you always go to a meeting with the intention of either catching up with old friends, and definitely the intention of making new ones. And I do this, I get into this mindset when I get to a scientific meeting. Uh, I know who the people are. Very often I've connected with a lot of my buddies from around the world. I know they're going to be at that meeting. So, several weeks before the meeting, we start exchanging emails. Maybe we start making plans, or at least I let them know that I'm going to be at that meeting, and I look forward to catching up. So you start creating that anticipation, because you're catching up with old friends and people that you've met at previous meetings. Because to be honest, very often, these are your professional friends. These friends are people that you only meet at meetings. These are folks that you see once or twice a year. Maybe you see them every couple of years. And so here's really your opportunity to catch up. And so you make plans for that. And then the other aspect of this, of course, is when you go to a meeting, and this is when you're starting out in your career, you definitely want to make new friends. There's new people to meet all the time. The younger people, there are older people, there are people who work directly in your field, maybe people who work in fields that are adjacent to your field. But you definitely want to go in with this open mind, and be very active about it. You really have the intention of, I'm going to this meeting because I want to meet people. That's your primary role for going to that meeting. So in order to do that, you need to remember the list that you've made of the people that you need to know, the people you want to know, the people that you want to know you. Well, look for those people. Look at the program, see where they're presenting. Uh, Look at pictures online so that you know what they look like, so that you can recognize them when you actually see them. And when you see them, uh, and you can strategically look for them, introduce yourself. Talk to your idols, talk to your peers, talk to the people that are on that list, and try to make it memorable. Remember, take the selfie. Promise to send them a copy of your last paper, or get their email, and then after the conference, send them an email, ask them a question, whatever it takes. Uh, but try to start building those relationships. Here's something that I think a lot of people don't do, and this is something that I wasn't doing enough of, but do quite regularly now. And this is talk to as many random people as possible. When you go to this meeting, there's always lineups. There's lineups up for registration. There's lineup for picking up the abstract book. There's lineups for presenting your for for submitting your slides. There's lines up. There's always lineups. When you stand in lineups, there's always somebody in front of you. There's always someone behind you. Talk to them. Find out where they are. Look at their name badges. Oh, you're from so and so, or you're from. Or these are random people. These are not people that you know. You ask them what they're doing. Ask them what field they work in. Ask them what what lab they're from. Start a little conversation. Learn to practice your small talk, because I can tell you, you never know what happens with these little conversations that happen. Uh, because there's something in the science of networking that's referred to as weak links. So these are not people who become your best friends. You never know, might happen. But just knowing people and having these relationships, it builds your small talk muscle. It gives you confidence. It gives you a chance to practice your elevator speech. And People want to talk. Most people are at these meetings because they want to be part of the community. Well, this is your chance to start building that community. Everybody's at that meeting for the same reason, because they share a passion, they have an interest in whatever that meeting is about. Unless you're going to a very general meeting where there's lots of, you go to if you go to a meeting that covers a lot of different topics, that might not be the case. But if you go to a meeting, say the Diabetes Association or Obesity Week or Heart and Stroke, everybody there has a certain interest. So it's not that difficult to get into conversation and start conversations with people. Uh, Identifying and hanging with connectors. So uh, this is a more subtle thing. So there are people in any network, and if you plot out a network, you'll always see that there's people in a network who are what you describe as connectors. These are people who know a lot of people. These are people who are really kind of part of this. If you want, they're the hub of information. So within every network, within every community, there's always a couple of people who seem to know everybody. They always know what's going on. They always know what the behind the scenes thing is. They'll be the first people to know stuff. Uh, so it's not hard to find those people or identify those people. If you ask around, most people have a sense of who the connectors are. Uh, Connect with the connectors, because they can be your way into a lot of information about what's going on, and who's who and who's doing what, and who do you need to know. Uh, Connectors are great that way because you can get a lot of information from them. They can also be very helpful, because if you need an introduction to somebody, well, it's very likely that the connector probably knows that person and can tell you how to go about it, or could just give you an introduction. They'll just say, oh, by the way, I want you to meet so and so, and they'll just do it. So uh, find out who the connectors are, connect with the connectors, and hang out with the connectors. Sometimes just hanging with the connector gets you connections, because they're the kind of people where other people tend to gravitate. So there's always a little bit of a crowd around that person, and there's always a buzz around those kind of folks. So you want to find them and you want to hang with them. Social events. I don't. A lot of people love social events. A lot of people just don't do social events. Part of it is the expense. If you have to pay an extra $30, $40, $60, $100 to do a social event, I get it. Maybe you're thinking, well, you know what, for those $100, I could have a great dinner by myself in a restaurant of my choosing with friends of my, you know, it's great, and I totally get it. But the question you really should be asking is, well, you're not going to pay $100 for a social event because of the dinner they're serving or the entertainment that's going to be there. No, you're actually paying the $100 for the social event because it's a social event. And it's your opportunity to actually now hang with the people that you've come to meet, because that's why you're there, uh, in an informal setting. That's really what you're paying for. You're not paying for the dinner. You're not paying for the the performance or the show or whatever else goes on at the. You're actually paying for this opportunity to hang out with the people that you're trying to get to know in a more informal setting. Hopefully, uh, having more time to talk to people in a much more informal way. Uh, so when you go to these social events, you look around the room, who's here. Again, a lot of people, they'll just hang out with the people they already know, or they'll just hang out with their own friends from their lab. Again, that defeats the whole purpose of the social event. The social event is a social event where you try to meet people, the people that you're planning to meet or the people you want to meet, or even just the random people that you happen to meet. So look around. Um, Introduce yourself to as many people as you can in the reception while everybody's still standing. So that gives you an opportunity to figure out who do you want to sit with, what table are you going to choose. Remember, once you sit down at the table, you don't have to be at that table all evening. You'll be at that table if there's a talk, you listen to the talk or the show, and then maybe but the minute dessert is served, or you just get up from that table, walk around, and and if there's an empty spot, sit at another table and talk to somebody else. I really prefer the buffets to the plated dinners, because the buffet gives you that opportunity of walking around and standing in line at the buffet. Again, you meet someone at the buffet, you want to continue the conversation. Well, then go sit at their table for a while. So this mix and mingle aspect of the social event is really, really important. It's your opportunity. Don't miss out on it if you can. I get it. If you can't afford the $100, you can't afford the $100, but it's generally money well spent. If you can do it. Now, if you can't do the actual social events because say money is a problem, create your own. What do I mean by create your own? Creating your own is letting everybody know what your plans for the evening are. So if I know I'm not going to the social event, or if there is no social event planned for that evening, uh, but you want to hang out with people, find out where everybody's going. Very often, if you're in a conference town, even in a very big town, there are certain places that most people are going to most likely to go. Find out what are you doing this evening? Like, where are you going? Who are you hanging out with? Uh, if uh, if you're the connector, if you're the person, tell people what your plans are, where you're planning to go. Try to create a group. That's something that's sometimes not very uh, there are lots of people at these meetings who have no idea what they want to do in the evening, right? They're all by themselves. They've traveled miles. They don't know anybody, don't know anybody at the conference, uh, never been to the town. They don't, they really don't know what to do in the evening. They're probably just going to go across the street to the next McDonald's and go back to their room and keep working on whatever work is that they brought. Uh, you don't want to be that person. You want to be the person who actually has a plan for the evening, brings people out. Be flexible in your plan. So don't make commitments, on one-on-one. So now you promise to meet with this one colleague, at a restaurant. Now you find out, oh, but there's 15 other people that you want to meet, and they're all going to this other place. Well, you've got to have the flexibility of either calling your colleague, I changed my mind, I'm going with these other guys, or convincing your colleague that that's where you want to go. So you have to have those flexibility, create your own events. Again, if you ever come to a Canadian Obesity Network meeting, we are very big on social events. Every single night there's an event, and usually these are not events that you have to pay for. It's as simple as letting a lot of people know, okay, here's the restaurant, or here's the club, or here's the pub that a lot of us are going to go to, even if it's after dinner, because sometimes, you hook up one-on-one for dinners, but then, dinner finishes at 8 or 9, and you're still left with 2 or 3 good hours that you could be hanging out with people and having fun. But now you don't know where everybody is. So yes, you can always go back to the hotel if you're in the conference hotel. You can always start at the hotel bar. That's where usually people will start trickling in after they've had dinner, and now they'll be hanging out in the hotel bar. Uh, I personally don't like hotel bars. They're generally no fun. Drinks are way too expensive. Um, I much prefer going out, but then for that you need to know where's everybody going, or what's actually happening. Create your social events. The social events is such an important part of your scientific meetings. Uh, it's never been easier to stay in touch with folks. Back in the old days, really, literally, you'd see people once a year at a national meeting, and that was it. That was your entire contact with those people. Once a year. Today, you can actually stay in touch with folks. Now, whether you hook up with them on LinkedIn or your Facebook page or Instagram or whatever the social media platform is that you use, hook up with people, stay in touch, because that makes it so much easier reconnecting when you see them again next year, right? And you'll have known what's going on. Oh, they've got a new job, or they moved somewhere, or they got a new paper out, or hey, they got married, they got engaged, they had a baby, whatever. That's a really important aspect of getting to know people. So take advantage of that, and take advantage of the social media. If you have to create a separate identity on social media just to keep up with your professional friends because you don't feel comfortable, sharing your personal stuff on your personal Facebook page, that's great. That's fine. Create your professional Facebook page. Uh, I have both. I have a personal Facebook page. I have a professional Facebook page. Works great. Uh, Here's my final point. You want to keep your friends close, which means, like the old saying goes, if there's people that you really like, people that you think are, they're just cool people to hang out with. You share a lot of the interests, both within and outside work. They're real friends. You get to be this gets to be a long-term relationship, which is great. Um, but you also want to look at your competitors. Who are the people who are working in your area of interest, who are about your age, maybe a year ahead, maybe a year behind, who are clearly the rising stars. These are the guys who are, they seem to be everywhere. They seem to be publishing. They seem to be getting all the oral presentations. They seem to be getting all the posters. They're getting all the awards. Everybody seems to know them. Everybody seems to be talking about them. Uh, and they're your competitors because they do exactly the same kind of work that you're doing. Maybe your work is even better. Maybe you even publish in higher impact journals, but somehow these guys are getting all the attention. You want to know who those people are, and you also want to connect with them. And this can be a very formal connection. Uh, but the reason that you really want to do this as you start creating your network is those are folks who are going to rise up. Very often they do, as you rise up. So these are, because they work in your area, these are going to be the people who are probably going to be reviewing your papers, reviewing your grants, and maybe the people that you'll be competing with directly one-on-one for positions that come up. And so you want to get to know them. You want to know who they are. You want to know what they think. You want to really know what they're about. And again, here's your opportunity for that. So rather than shy away and say, oh, they're getting all the attention, and you might not even like them personally very much. They don't have to become your lifelong best friend. It's not about that. It's about getting to know them in a way that you kind of know what they're about and what they're doing. And maybe, if you look at them and how successful they are, and it may not just be the quality of their work, they might be using a lot of the techniques that I've talked about here in my talk. And so this is also your opportunity to just emulate some of those things that they're doing, because it will eventually help you in your career. What you really want to do when you go to scientific meetings, you want to become part of that community. Because when we talk about scientific and professional communities, it is a community. These are families. These are relationships. These are relationships that can last you throughout your career. These are the people who share your interests. They share your passion. They come at it from very different angles. There's lots of ideas that float around, and you really want to be part of that community, and you want to be a good person in that community. But to be someone, think of it as living in your own community. People want to look at you as someone who's a nice fellow, somebody that they can hang out with, someone that you can trust, someone you can talk to, someone who can help them, someone who's helpful, someone who'll step out and lend a hand when that's necessary. You just want to be part of that community. And so when you go to a scientific meeting, you're really thinking of everybody in that meeting as being part of your professional community. And so being a good citizen means you got to get to know who's in that community and really function in that community. So on that note, I want to thank you all for listening. I certainly look forward to comments if anybody has any ideas of how to get even more out of a scientific meeting, or if anybody heard something on this webinar, that and a light bulb went off, or something like that. I'd love to hear about it. You can easily find me if you Google Dr. Sharma obesity. It'll take you to this page, which is my obesity notes page. You'll find my contact details here. And by the way, if you're interested in obesity and what I have to say about it, you're welcome to subscribe, and you'll find that of interest. And if now you're all gung-ho about going to scientific meetings, well, here's just one meeting that you might want to take advantage of. It's a meeting in Canada, and it's going to be in Banff Springs in late April of next year. And it's the 5th Canadian Obesity Summit, which is sort of the Canadian version of Obesity Week, if you want. So thank you all for listening, and I certainly look forward to your comments.